Once again, happy Friday, everybody. Good to see you. Sorry we missed Monday, but hey, impermanence happens. But here we are again. Yuri put in a lot of hours to make sure that we had something that would work while he was gone. So thanks to him. As he said, he did this for us, for all of us. So if you see him, give him a nice thank you or something. Because like I say, he worked some long hours to put this all back together for us. So let's get started like we normally do. A short period of bell meditation. Wherever you are behind your avatar, get into a nice meditation posture. And as I ring the Ching bell, the idea, just focus on the sound of the bell. Practice your deep listening. Let's absorb some Dharma today. Chances are you will get distracted, happens to all of us. When it does, just gently remind yourself and go back to focusing on the sound of the bell. Then there'll be a pause after the short meditation. I'll do the 3 recitations and then on with the talk for today. So I'll give you a moment, get into a nice posture. We'll begin at the sound of the bell. I go for refuge to the Buddha, the teacher. I go for refuge to the Dharma, the teaching. I go for refuge to the Sangha, the taught. I take refuge in the Buddha. I take refuge in the Dharma. I take refuge in the Sangha. I have taken refuge in the Buddha. I have taken refuge in the Dharma. I have taken refuge in the Sangha. 3 pure precepts. Cease to do harm. Do only good. Do good for others. Bodhisattva vow. However innumerable all beings are, I vow to lead them all. However inexhaustible my delusions are, I vow to extinguish them all. However immeasurable the Dharma teachings are, I vow to master them all. However endless the Buddha's way is, I vow to follow it completely. Swaha. Okay, so there's some folks in here that have heard this one before and have seen all the reactions from this particular subject. Today we're going to talk about the charitable prince. It's a Jataka tale about Vesantara, the charitable prince, or as I like to call him, the prince of generosity. So this is a Jataka tale. The Jataka tales are a series of tales that were even pre-Hindu in India, in that area of the continent. And they've been around thousands of years before Siddhartha, but they became these Jataka tales, tales of lives of Siddhartha before he was Siddhartha. Well, in The Charitable Prince, it reveals these deep Hindu roots of a story that was a cultural and religious parable 1,000 years or more before the arising of the history. That's Siddhartha Gautama. In the Theravada tradition, the Buddha is said to have told this tale on his first return visit to Kapilavatthu, his home. And even now, this story is venerated in the Tet Machat festival in Thailand and is honored in many South Asian. The view and intent of the lesson and the actions needed are different depending on what reader the Buddhist, or what Buddhist tradition the reader has come from. So whether you're a Theravada or Mahayana, you kind of get a different view of this, and you'll see as I read it, I think. Excuse me. The tale of Vesantara is offered to teach the significance of dana and of generosity on the path to enlightenment. The story has been celebrated as a historical event and as a religious teaching in Theravada literature, art, and in popular practice. Vesantara became an arhat and was said to be the past life that directly preceded the Buddha of this era. So there was Siddhartha, and right before him, Vesantara. That's how the story goes. Well, this connection is very important in Theravada literature and practice because it highlights the importance and practice of generosity in reaching individual ultimate knowledge or awakening. So it plays a very big role in that tradition. Viewing the tale from a Mahayana perspective, the lessons become much different. The lesson becomes an apophatic teaching, offering thoughts and actions that must be abandoned in order to promote the alleviation of suffering that the Buddha teaches is paramount in transforming human existence. Happy Friday, Ramiel. Good to see you. So first what I'm going to do is read the Jataka tale. Then we'll talk about it after that. Excuse me. So again, this is Vesantara, the Charitable Prince, a Jataka tale. Fusati, Sakka's principal consort, became the mother of the historical Buddha of our time in his next to the last birth. She gave birth to a son, and he was named Vesantara. At the time of his birth, he spoke, saying, "Mother, what gift can I make?" As a youth, Vesantara contented himself with giving away readily and frequently the things he had acquired. At 16, the kingdom of Sivi was given over to him, and he was married to Princess Mati. The kingdom prospered, and their marriage was a happy one, and they had a son named Jali and a daughter named Kahiyana. And when Vesantara was a baby, though, a young white elephant was brought to the royal stables, and Vesantara often rode this elephant through the city. He distributed gold to the alms halls. And indeed, many of his subjects attributed the prosperity of the kingdom and the benign rains that watered the fields to the virtue of this white elephant. At one time, the nearby kingdom of Kalinga was suffering from a prolonged drought. The kingdom's people prayed and supplicated to the gods, but the drought would not end. Hearing of the white elephant and of Vesantara's generosity, they suggested that the king send emissaries to ask Vesantara for the creature. Hearing the request, Vesantara granted it immediately. The citizens of Vesantara's kingdom were so distressed by the loss of the white elephant that they felt had ensured their prosperity. They forced King Sanjaya to resume the throne and banish Vesantara. Before being banished, Vesantara gave away all of his possessions, and he had a lot. The people came from far away in order to receive a gift. Then, with his wife and children who refused to remain behind, he took leave of the kingdom. They left in a chariot drawn by 4 horses. Excuse me. A short way outside the gates, they came upon 4 Brahmin who had arrived too late to be given gifts. So the holy men asked for the 4 horses, which Vesantara promptly gave them. A 5th Brahmin, seeing the others riding away, asked for the chariot and was immediately gifted with it. The noble prince and wife continued on their way by foot, each carrying one of their children. Later, Jujaka, a penniless Brahmin who was unable to buy slaves for his beautiful young wife, sought out the fabled generosity of Vesantara. He found Vesantara then found Vesantara alone in a forest hermitage where the ex-prince lived as an ascetic with his family. As soon as Vesantara caught sight of the old man, he was overjoyed, for he knew that at last he had the opportunity to make a supreme gift. Jujaka made his unusual request, and Vesantara agreed to give Jujaka his 2 beloved children. The children, hearing the words, tried to hide, but Vesantara coaxed them out and presented them to Jujaka. Jujaka bound the children's hands with vines, whipping them with the same vines to move them on their way. Vesantara began to weep, but realizing that his grief was due to attachment, he regained the calm of an ascetic. Vesantara did not tell his wife Maddie what he had done. Instead, he watched as the distraught mother searched in vain for the children. Overcome with distress, Vesantara eventually told her, and she did not protest. Understanding his desire to give away all he possessed, she rejoiced that he made such a supreme gift in his effort to reach ultimate knowledge. Saka, the king of the gods, had been observing and knew that Vesantara would next give away Maddie in order to achieve his goal. Saka took the guise of a Brahmin and approached the hermitage. Vesantara realized then that he must give away his dear wife in order to reach his goal. He gave her willingly to the old Brahmin, and Maddie submitted without a word. She knew that it was the way for her husband to attain perfect knowledge. Having seen that Vesantara was capable of supreme charity, Saka returned Maddie to him. Remember Jujaka. Jujaka, with the children, he got lost in the forest and found themselves in the town of Sivi, where the children were recognized by King Sanjaya, the children's grandfather. And the king, overjoyed, did not punish Jujaka. Instead, he paid the man a great ransom, which he used to live in a sumptuous existence until he died of overindulgence. King Sanjaya found Vesantara and Maddie at the hermitage, where he reunited them with their children. The king asked Vesantara to resume his role as the ruler of the kingdom of Sivi. He accepted. Vesantara ruled gloriously for many years, and after his death remained a symbol of generosity for all time. This particular version of the tale is edited from a book called 10 Lives of the Buddha, Siamese Temple Paintings, and Jataka Tales by Elizabeth Ray, Claire Rosenfield, and Dorothy Bailey, and this was done in 1972. So you can find all kinds of different versions. They all pretty much run the same route. So you're welcome to go out. In fact, I encourage you to go out and find other examples because that's the way we learn. Now, in the Mahayana tradition, the practice of generosity is experienced as the foundation from which all ethical thinking and moral behaviors arise from. This idea of generosity. It's at the very core of any bodhisattva in training. And it doesn't matter if they are a monastic who has practiced for decades or a layperson who has recently stepped onto the noble path. Generosity is that foundation. Notably, generosity is not mentioned in the Four Noble Truths or in its Eightfold Path. The practice of generosity, given freely without expectation, is the first of the 6 refinements in the Mahayana tradition, or what I think of as the Bodhisattva in Training Handbook. The how, the why, the what, and the when of acting generously should be grounded firmly in the intention of the Four Ennobling Truths and its Eightfold Path, or it will have the tendency to fall into negative karmic consequences. Reading and experiencing Vesantara, the charitable prince, there arise more examples, at least from a Mahayana view, of how not to practice generosity, at least from the view of a bodhisattva in training. The first 3 ennobling truths are that suffering exists for all human beings, the cause is craving, attachment, and dualistic thinking, and a path to the cessation of suffering exists. The initial experience of Vesantara might be, wow, what a generous person he is. His kingdom, his horses, his chariot, his wealth, his children, and his wife. And certainly in the tale, he did those things. But we have to look at his intent, and the intent differs. From a Theravada point of view, the intent is to reach ultimate knowledge or to reach nirvana or enlightenment, however you want to frame it. So you think about what was Vesantara's intent? Well, he wanted to lessen the suffering of the neighboring town of Kalinga. He wanted to ease the suffering of the 6 Brahmins, including Saka, who proposed himself to be a Brahmin. Or as the tale states, to advance Vesantara's goal of attaining ultimate knowledge or awakening as an arhat. I want to go back through the tale and just take particular sections of it. But first, are there any questions or comments that have arisen just from what has been said so far? Well, if something comes up, I'll catch it. So I want to go back to, make sure I get the right one here. I have questions for you. And you don't have to answer these out loud. These are questions for you to contemplate and think about. Should acts of generosity be a burden to the giver? One answer to that is no. They shouldn't always be a burden, but sometimes they are. Sometimes generosity can be a burden. Is finding contentment in generosity a selfish response? No. But it may be for you. Think about it. What should be one's intent when acting with generosity of spirit? Basically, why should you be generous? These are all questions we have to ask ourselves when we think about generosity. Now, it says, in trying to relieve someone else's suffering, the man has added to the suffering of his kids and wife. That'd be hard to disagree with, right? But Notice that they made it clear that the wife and child or children in that culture and in that time, they were considered property, just like the chariot, just like the horses. While love played a role, possession played a much larger role. So while he was, in fact, giving away his wife and children, they saw them in a different way than we see them in our contemporary world. Right? They saw them as possessions, not as, let's call them human beings in their own right, for want of a better way to think about it. Another question, is a wife given away not a way of slavery? Absolutely. I mean, that's how I would view it. As what other reason would somebody want to take the woman away from her husband or the children away from the father? And especially with the children, tie their hands and then, take them off into the forest. Let's talk about white elephants. The white elephant in Hindu, and this also applies to Taiwanese and Burmese iconography, the white elephant is considered a sacred thing and it's a sign of nobility. In Buddhist iconography, it is the symbol of Queen Maya, the mother of Siddhartha, because of that prophetic dream of a white elephant that foretold her pregnancy, and she was carrying Siddhartha. So the white elephant has a lot of symbolism throughout India, or throughout a lot of the East Asian countries for that. But there is a contemporary definition of white elephant that also applies to generosity. So they thought that this elephant was making the rains come for civis, so the folks in Kalinga wanted the elephant. They wanted rain too. So it was a generous thing, right, for Vesantar to give it away. But a contemporary definition of white elephant is a possession or an act that provides few benefits and is an inconvenience or a financial burden to maintain. This is why they have white elephant sales, stores, because all that inventory is a financial burden. It's an inconvenience. And so they're trying to get rid of it. So they're being, in a way, generous by selling this stuff at lower prices. So even in this contemporary society, white elephant has retained some image of generosity. I see some other things come up here. Participating in slavery by giving someone into slavery is not virtuous. The end of the story redeems it by granddad being able to buy them back. And it does redeem it in a way. It softens the edges of the story. Now, keep in mind, that's if you're looking at it from one view. If you're looking at it from a Mahayana-inspired view, or from a more contemporary-inspired view, taking Buddhism out of the picture, that is what you will see, that this is giving away people, basically. But from a Theravada view, they hold to that understanding of culture and context and time, that the story took place, and they don't bring it forward into contemporary time. So because they were considered possessions, and it was his right to give them away, then that's what he did. So again, we always have to keep in mind that depending on tradition, the view, the intent, and the actions, while they are the same in both, they are perceived differently. And neither one is right or wrong, they just are at that point. But when we bring the story forward and we look at it with a contemporary view, then we have to look at it, or we should look at it, as kind of being a more negative kind of tale, saying this is what you shouldn't do. Let's say, well, we are in a higher state of mind, at least in Western culture. White elephant is pureness, and that's another one. Yeah. See, white elephant can also be a symbol for a received cumbersome gift that must be maintained. That's yes. So white elephant has a lot of different connotations. And again, it depends on the culture and context. All right, let's see. Here's a question. Is this an appropriate way to act with generosity? And I've kind of already answered it at this point, but you have to think about this yourself. Is this an appropriate way to act with generosity? There are certain points in the story that, while not appropriate, they're not really that inappropriate. You know, giving away the horses and the chariot, well, you can walk. Giving away the white elephant, that's kind of iffy because that affected a whole town. Right? It wasn't just his elephant to give away. It kind of was part of the town's makeup itself. So we have to think, is this an appropriate way to act with generosity? And again, I stress, it depends on the view, the intent, and the action within the tradition that's viewing it. And we have to accept that. There's something about generosity. An individual who acts with generosity without first engaging appropriate mindfulness, view, and concentration can find themselves being taken advantage of. In the traditional tale, it is Brahmins, and these are people that were like at the top of the Indian social strata, right? In contemporary time and culture, the Brahmin metaphor comes in many forms. Religiously motivated, fake nonprofits, political campaigns, and people that are just plain greedy. So in order to make generosity have value, we've got to be aware of these things in a contemporary time. You can believe, and I feel rightly so, that there are more people out to do good with your generosity than those who seek to take advantage. And that makes it even more important to look at the Eightfold Path as a guide to determining who is in most need. So we've got Vesantara. He's riding out of town. He's got his 4 horses and his chariot and his wife and his kids. And the first 4 Brahmin walk up to him and say, "Man, we really like those horses. Can we have them?" Well, the question there, if we're engaging in generosity, is just because somebody asks you for something, is it an act of generosity to give it to them? This is something I don't think we've really talked much about with generosity. If somebody asks you for something and you give it to them, is that an act of generosity or an act of compliance and agreement? Now, someone says, I think generosity can be made without hurting the others in the family and town. Oh, absolutely. There could have been many opportunities, like you can borrow the elephant. Okay? You borrow it for a month, get the reins going in your part of the woods, and then bring it back and we'll use it here. Something that simple. In the case of the horses and the chariot, they could have said, Vesantara could have said, well, you walk this far, so can't you just walk the rest of the way to town and find your own horses? Just because somebody asks for something, we do not have to be generous and give it to them. Now, if somebody says it depends on how bad they needed those horses. How badly did Vesantara and his family need the horses? This is where generosity can become confusing, if you will, because somebody asks or you think they need it and you'd like to give it to them, but you're using it and you need it, so do you take care of yourself and your family first and then others? Yes. So just because somebody asks you for something, it's not necessarily an act of generosity to give it. Because you'd have to engage appropriate mindfulness. Somebody said here, who is to judge who needed the horses more? The person that owns them at that point. Right? That's about all you could say with that. That Vesantara was the deciding factor there. Could have said yes, could have said no. Just like you or I can say yes or no. Now, slavery was brought up, and I want to make a mention of that. One of the livelihoods that the Buddha clearly stated was inappropriate was dealing in slavery. Traditionally, then, why is Vesantara given a pass for giving his children into slavery? Well, it's because he was trying to get ultimate knowledge. He was trying to make it to nirvana. He was trying to get enlightened. And that's a justification, at least in the time, context, and Buddhist tradition of him doing that. Now, in this contemporary world, of course, there is no justification, religious or otherwise, that can make this type of action the right thing to do. But there was a moment when Vesantara showed some real empathy for his children, but then he found justification for giving them away in a very dogmatic view of his goal. I have to do this to prove that I'm not attached to anything. We got a couple others. I was taught to give from out your excess, otherwise you hurt others or yourself by denying needed resources. The Buddha made it pretty clear. When we get talking about Sigalovada Sutta coming up soon here this year, we're going to talk about wealth. And one of the things that is talked about is you take your wealth and you take care of yourself and your family first. Then you take care of others. And it's very clear that is what the Buddha expected from us. Take care of ourselves and our families, then take care of others. Because you can't take care of others unless you're taking care of yourself. And as was said, you're not only denying them resources, but you're denying yourself resources too. And not giving might be seen as an act of generosity in some instances, or giving something else, like giving the person a lift, like a ride, for example. Absolutely. So you guys you're getting this. That's great. Because not giving can be an act of generosity. Though it might not seem like that to the person being most affected. You guys, some of you have heard this example before, but this was years ago when there was I think he was 32 or 33 years old, and he was living in his parents' house. They were being very generous to let him live there. He wasn't paying rent. He wasn't doing any of that. He was just a couch potato, but they were generous. They were his parents. Well, it came to a point where they just couldn't take it anymore, and he came home one day and the doors was locked. He tried his key, and his key didn't work. Went to the back door, and that key didn't work either. Windows were all locked. Knock on the door. Mom, Dad, I can't get in. They said, yeah, because you don't live here anymore. We can't let you be this way anymore. You've got to learn to grow up. That was an act of generosity on their part. Was it hurtful generosity in a way? Yeah. But it is generosity. So somebody is defending Vesantara, and that's good. I like that. He couldn't feed his kids at that point either, so giving them away may have provided them with food and shelter. We don't know if he could feed them. That's something that never comes up in the story, that the children were starving or without food. They were just at a hermitage. A whole nother weirdness. If he's a hermit, then he has his family there, then he's not a hermit. Anyway. And let's see. Somebody asked, what if someone wanted the prince's life? Well, according to what I know about that particular tradition, the answer would have been he would have given his life. If he would have thought it was appropriate, yes, he would have given his life. Somebody else says, I think also of time, mental, and emotional energy, not just physical goods. Oh, absolutely. Remember, we've talked about generosity, and generosity isn't just material goods. We give of ourselves and our skills and our time and our loving kindness. We give a lot of things out of generosity. There's a point in this tale where he's given away the children and his wife comes back and she's all upset, and Vesantara doesn't say anything. I kind of imagine him saying, well, gosh, honey, I don't know. Maybe they're run off in the woods somewhere or something. But anyway, Vesantara is more than willing to let his wife suffer for his actions. You know, she's crying and sobbing, and she's a mother. She's lost her children. But yet, when the suffering became Vesantara's own suffering, when he came to the realization that he was kind of sad about it too, then he opted to tell her. When his wife forgave him for doing that, and that's what she did, she performed the ultimate act of giving by offering Vesantara forgiveness for his actions. He was a husband that gave her children away, and she forgave it. Now, granted, had to do with culture and context and all that, but it's still an ultimate act of generosity. Sometimes forgiveness can be that. Someone said, that seems fair. Time, mental, emotional energy. Oh, yeah. Anytime that you gift somebody with those, that's generosity. And we do it all the time. We're just not mindful of it. You know, if you were at work and there's a really grumpy person at work and you smile at them and talk nice to them and you know, help them through the day, that's generosity. So someone says, of course, burden of generosity is also dependent on point of view. There is a Finnish proverb, and I'm not going to try to say it, that means good ones give from the little they have, bad ones do not give from their largesse. Meaning good ones give even when they don't have much, bad ones do not give and they have a whole lot. So we're just talking about greed there, right? Greed and its opposite, generosity. Someone said enabling destructiveness hurts the other person. Yeah. Causes suffering. And somebody responded, that type of generosity reminds me of not enabling others. Yeah, not allowing them to continue on a negative or unwholesome path, doing what you can. I seem to remember back in my day, they were talking about tough love. That might be kind of an example of that idea. So if we look at a traditional view taken by Theravada practitioners, this tale offers the path that an individual can take to arhatship, right, to reach that ultimate knowledge. And it was valid. It was valid then, and it is valid now, again, depending on the Buddhist tradition. Today, and this is from an engaged Dharma, pragmatic Buddhist view, if we see it as an apophatic teaching, meaning a teaching that says, here's what you don't do, so don't do this, do the opposite, then it's a good teaching, right? One where the wrong way to act is presented in order that the student can come to realize on their own the better way to act. Just like you've done here, right? You've looked at the different things that Vesantara did, and you discerned wholesome, unwholesome, right, not right, appropriate, not appropriate. So, I ask you, go out, find other versions of this Jataka tale. Vesantara, it's spelled like it sounds, actually. You can find many different versions. Read 2 or 3 of them. Experience them. These are how we find our lessons. These are how we learn. This is one of the ways. And then decide for yourself if that sort of path to generosity might work for you. Because it might. And somebody said the tale reminds me of Job from the Bible in a way. And it is pretty interesting how stories from the Bible and from the sutras and other religious texts, they have such similarities to them. And you'll have people that will say, whoa, wait a minute, that's because, Jesus met the Buddha or whatever. I think it's more that we're all human beings. We all suffer. We all have lives that go through similar paths, if you will. And so they seem similar. Just because as human beings, like, if we live in the UK or in India or in Canada or America, we still have similar things that happen to us in life that we have to deal with or enjoy, as the case may be. Alrighty then, let's do sharing the merit. Showing our gratitude and generosity, practicing the way of awareness which gives rise to benefits without limit, we vow to share these benefits of our practice, service, and gifts with all beings. Let us be reminded that a life of engagement and compassion is supremely important. Time swiftly passes by and opportunity is lost. Each of us must strive to become aware of our connectedness to others and not squander the gift of realizing the wisdom of engaging the Dharma. Swaha.